Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get going. We are having technical difficulties here at District of North Van Hall. We have been able to verify that the Zoom connection is working, so long as people are not trying to access it through the DNB server. The DNB main web page is loading extremely slowly, so members of the public that want to attend the workshop tonight and we're looking for the link on our website may have some challenges, but it did load. It just took a long time to load. What we've done is we've decided to send the link out through social media. So our comms group is going to make sure that people who are connected can get the direct Zoom link through our social media. They'll get that notification. The workshop itself is not a decision-making meeting. We have a report tonight, an update, but because it's not a decision-making meeting, I'm going to proceed as is. But if we don't have that in place, an option for people to be able to connect to the regular meeting of council, which occurs at 7 o'clock tonight, then we're going to have to look at alternatives. But at this point, I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the council workshop for Monday, June 13th, taking place at 5 o'clock. This meeting is taking place in a hybrid fashion. Members of the public, staff, and council can participate virtually or in person at this meeting. Tonight, council, I have an agenda that's been circulated as part of the package. Are there any errors or omissions from the agenda as presented? Hearing none, will someone please move adoption of the agenda? Moved by Councillor Hanson, second by Councillor Forbes. Call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We also have two sets of minutes that were circulated with the package from the April 11th council workshop and the April 25th council workshop. Are there any errors or omissions from those minutes as presented? Hearing none, will someone please move adoption of both sets of minutes? Moved by Councillor Forbes, seconded by Councillor Curran. Call the question on the matter. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. All right, on to the regular report for this evening's meeting. I'd like to welcome Emily Dickin from the North Shore Emergency Management Office to make a presentation. Mr. Stewart, I see your camera on. Did you have a comment for the front end of the meeting?
No, Your Worship. Otherwise, and this is just an opportunity for Emily to provide an update on the activities of North Shore Emergency Program, and also particularly comment on preparations with respect to warming and overheating issues, and how we're going to be dealing with those in the community, as there are reports that we may experience those again this year. So work has been done, and we're just trying to provide council with an update.
Thank you very much. Ms. Dickin, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Little, and thank you, Council, for having me tonight. Before I get started, I'd just like to graciously acknowledge the traditional territories of the Squamish Nation, the Musqueam Nation, and the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, on whose lands I so humbly do this work on, and really extend my gratitude to the partnerships that we've fostered with both the Squamish Nation and Tsleil-Waututh Nation over the past year and a half of my time with Nassim. I'm just going to screen share and jump into my presentation. And so there we go. I can see it popped up in the background. So perfect. Thank you guys so much for holding the space for the Nassim update tonight. This is an update that looks at both the 2021 and 2022 operational years at Nassim. I'm going to move through a three-part presentation tonight, looking at a Nassim update that goes through our really key and core business areas, showcase a little bit of the strategic planning and governance work that we've been working on as a team, and then dig into the North Shore extreme weather strategy, specifically focusing on extreme heat, but providing a bit of context for the response that took place in 2021. So this is the Nassim team as it sits right now, and it really shows a bit of a hybrid workforce that we're still working in. The team dynamics have been a bit fluid since I started with Nassim. It's been a team where we've had some of our members take leaves at different times, and we've had one of our key members move on from our team. So Mike Andrews early in 2022, and right now we're going through a recruitment for a new manager of operational readiness. My hope is by later this week we have a new name to announce and a new person to welcome to the Nassim team. But as you'll see through this presentation, Mike left an incredible legacy, especially when we get to the space of operational readiness with the team. Over 2021, I spent a lot of time coming into Nassim and really looking at where the strengths and limitations of the program sat. As many of you know, Nassim is really a beacon of emergency management within the Metro Vancouver municipalities. It has an incredibly unique structure. And as a result of the funding structure, we have one of the most diverse and well-built emergency management teams, I would say in Metro Vancouver and provincially and likely even nationally. It's a very unique model, but what it does is it allows us to bring true subject matter experts in who really know their role and skill sets within emergency management, and it allows us to build a really deep and rich team. And I think you'll see that when we talk about the project work that we're invested in. Cultural safety and humility was a big undertaking last year for the Nassim team. As many of you know, I am a woman of Indigenous descent and came from First Nations Health Authority over to the Nassim program. And with that, I felt that it was really important to think about how cultural safety and humility sits within our team and how we both kind of express that space of work together, but also how we move through that work when we're supporting community members. As a result, we were able to actually take some cultural safety and humility training as a team this year. And not only did it further, I think, how we do our work and how we bring ourselves to work, it actually brought us together as a team and kind of dismantled, not necessarily points of friction, but it really dismantled how we work together and how we work together in kind of a deeper connected sense. 2021 really allowed me to think about how Nassim has brought itself to short, medium, and long-term strategic and workforce planning, but also how we were really managing our budgets. One thing that was really new for me in 2021 was setting the budget for 2022. And it made me realize that we hadn't really put a lot of the work into thinking about what our strategic priorities were as a program area, but also how we were meeting the diverse municipal strategic priorities across the North Shore. And work planning has really helped us do that. It's helped us not only set priorities, but make sure that we're moving forward with the work priorities that are going to help carry us into the future. And as we move through this presentation, you'll see where some of these moving and featured priorities are, primarily around extreme heat, active threat planning, and a few other things where we actually saw a need for kind of increased resilience across the North Shore. We are still maintaining a hybrid workspace at Nassim, even though we're highly operational. What we've found is that the team is able to maintain a hybrid workforce. And when needed, we're still really able to move into that quick space of response. We've also found that when we do have to stand up our response structure, whether it's a virtual whether it's an EOC, quite often we move into a virtual EOC before standing up the full scale EOC. And this actually lends itself really well to that kind of hybrid COVID workspace. And then maintaining quarterly and annual reporting. So something that I'm moving forward with this year is obviously meeting with mayor and councils across the North Shore, but also meeting more regularly with the CAOs to check in, to make sure that the space is still progressing and the work is moving forward in a way that meets the municipal needs, and making sure that that's done both through verbal check-ins, but also through annual reporting, which was shared with you guys in your package and is something that Nassim has moved back to. In terms of ongoing priorities for Nassim for 2022, stabilizing our HR process is a core priority of mine for this year. Not only will we be welcoming a new manager of operational readiness soon, my hope is that when we move into 2023, we can really look at building out some of the 0.5 or 0.7 FTEs that we have into full-time positions and really kind of maximize that depth of capacity within the Nassim team. We find that both our ESS position and our public education position are not full-time FTEs, and they carry a very heavy workload. And it would be great to see how we build out that capacity while still maintaining our salary budgets. And then strategic planning and operational governance have been something that has been a new thing that I've really been digging into, and through the support of Chief Hutchinson and the other fire chiefs across the North Shore, as well as the police leads, we're about to bring together a public safety North Shore-wide leadership group to really make sure that we can harmonize some of the strategic priorities across public safety within the North Shore. We've recognized that there's areas for improvement in this space, and by coming together and honoring the unique values and visions that our municipalities have, we can still find the spaces of connection that tie us all together with public safety. The other major operational activity was really acknowledging the extreme weather responses of 2021. Recognizing that we went through both extreme heat and cold events and making really focused changes into that. And I'm going to talk about that a bit later in the presentation. But training and municipal readiness is also a core focus of Nassim. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned over the past year and a half is that Nassim provides a lot of deeply valuable training, but we can do it in a way that better connects with our staff, that values their time in a better way, and connects with them in a way that honors the new hybrid workspace and actually creates a better platform for engagement. And so one of the things that we're working on is how to create virtual training platforms so that people can log on and take advantage of the training when it works for them. And we're about to move forward with that over the coming weeks. Nassim was highly active in planning. In 2021, we welcomed John Hawkes onto the team. He's our manager of planning and resilience, and he came onto the team and really got to work in a quick way. Active threat planning became a really high priority on the Nassim portfolio, first with the CNV. And then as various events happened across DNV, there was an opportunity for us to bring the same playbook and planning approach to the district, and it was really welcomed by the leadership team. We're now well underway with the active threat planning in the District of North Van, and we have a wonderful young planning coordinator, Simon, who's also joined our team, who's able to really take this work on and lead it in a really powerful way. Business continuity has been a core focus at Nassim. We're really looking at how we create risk awareness and risk analysis. This also dovetails really nicely into the active threat and security planning. And we're finding that we're actually able to look at both in concert and understand what that risk awareness looks like at the municipal level. We've spent a lot of time through the extreme heat planning, recognizing that seniors require an additional level of support and services for planning. There's a real nuance to that. And through our partnerships with the seniors working group for COVID response, we've been able to mobilize those supports through Silver Harbor and really actually come to ground on how we can improve our work, how we can create better engagement, and how through this partnership, we can actually make some meaningful change. And John's been doing a really beautiful job of leading this work and actually getting out into the community and facilitating discussions. The extreme heat planning I'm going to leave to a little bit later because it's so all-encompassing and there's a few slides specific to that. But also top of mind in 2021 was the Capilano Dam emergency response planning that's been done in concert with the 3 municipalities. And the District of North Van Engineering Department, through Steve Ono's leadership, has been an invaluable point of contact for Nasim. We've also been working to facilitate and lead the Sea Level Rise Working Group. This is being done in concert with the Climate Action Group and Carolyn's leadership, and really, though, looking at it from a regional perspective. And in fact, this team was given an award last year for the instrumental work and the leadership that went into that space. In 2022, before the fall, Nasim will release its hazard, risk, and vulnerability assessment. This is beautiful and rich, detailed hazard and vulnerability work that was done actually under Fiona's leadership while she was at Nasim. There was an incredible financial investment made to this, and we're in a place now where we can really bring it to life in a beautiful way. We'll look both to use this as an internal planning document for risk, but we'll also look to make sure that it's translatable to the public and can be used for public perceptions around risk awareness. By the end of 2022, Nasim will be rolling out the active threat plan with the District of North Van, and it will be ready to exercise in partnership with the RCMP. We'll also be about a year into understanding how the extreme heat plan went through its first operational cycle with its updates, and it will give us a chance to actually go back and reaffirm that the planning assumptions that we moved forward with were true. And this is something that we'll continue to do with the working groups that have helped inform that plan and that process. I'm also really excited to dig into municipal recovery and community-based recovery. And this is something that we're facing right now with the evacuees from Silver Lynn, recognizing how layered, how complex a recovery strategy needs to be, and really how, as an organization, we really truly need to wrap around our most vulnerable community members and find the strength and spaces of support within our community-based organizations. We're also exploring the North Shore seismic strategy, recognize that it's time to update that. Given other moving priorities, we'll likely just look at how our monitors and sensors on the North Shore are working and pull them up to full functionality. As our manager of operational readiness comes on, this will be one of the first tasks that they undertake, and it will give a good chance for them to get out to all of the spaces that we actually have our seismic sensors in and actually meet staff and have a conversation about why these sensors are important. And the final one that I really want to think about in planning is really the North Shore Resilience Framework. This work is so important, and it's beyond just the space of emergency management, but it is so critical when we look at the complexities that are challenging emergency management on the day-to-day. If I think about my career, probably from 2017 on, it's a bit of a benchmark. There is a marked shift in how disasters have been impacting our communities, both at a local level, but also at a regional level. And this isn't just the physical dimensions of hazards that are impacting our community, but the social dynamics, the economic fabric of our communities, the aging infrastructure, all of these components actually swirl together when we think about a resilience framework. And when we look at it from the context of emergency management, the work that we do seems to ripple apart when we go into an event and we see gaps in the space of comprehensive resilience. And my hope is that by starting these conversations, bringing people to the table and really understanding what resilience means on the North Shore, we can start to build that narrative and start to build what that picture looks like collectively. Because it's not just an emergency management picture, it's not just a climate picture, an infrastructure picture. It takes the wisdom of the collective and the leadership of the municipalities to bring this work to life. And I see that coming to life within the strategic framework at the District of North Van. So I'm very hopeful. It's been a busy year, and it was 2 busy years in public education. We have an amazing public education coordinator, Jocelyn Hewson, and she does such exceptional work and gets out into the community. One of the spaces of governance that we've really improved at Nassim is standing up a North Shore Public Education and Communications Committee. This is comprised of the communications directors from across the North Shore, as well as various other public safety, public education leaders, so from fire and from police. And what we've found is that it's been a way to kind of harmonize the conversations that we're having with the public and actually get out in front of disaster events. And I just have to hold my hands up to the comms directors on the North Shore, and especially Carolyn. They provided such incredible leadership to Nassim and really helped us kind of course correct and kind of set the stage for how we communicate in a better way and how we really engage the public. And so I just have a lot of gratitude for the patience and wisdom that they've brought into the Nassim fold. But this is a really critical part when I think about how governance, how public safety governance looks on the North Shore. One of the things that we developed last summer was a trifold brochure for evacuation. And I really realized that Nassim hasn't done a great job of communicating its operational plans or operational readiness. Out of all of the spaces that I've worked, Nassim is so profoundly prepared and so ready for events, and the plans are incredibly robust, and it speaks to the depth of the program. But there hasn't been a great point of communication to the public between what these plans look like and how they come to life out in the community. And so the North Shore Evacuation Guide was our first step at bringing one of these plans into that public sphere. And I think it was received really well. And it's something that we'll continue to work on. Each year, I would suspect that we'll probably find one or two operational plans that we'll bring to life, and we'll kind of take that shape. One of the things that we're also doing, and this is really hits close to home this week, is developing public education materials in Farsi and Cantonese. We've actually had to work intimately with translation experts over the past few weeks to support the evacuees. And this is such an incredible piece of the work that needs to continue to take shape. We have a lot of Nassim volunteers and outreach through our community-based organizations that can support with this. And it will be a space that we continue to hold a budget for at Nassim to make sure that all of the resources that we create are translatable and relatable to the communities that we serve. Emergency Preparedness Week was a real time to shine for us. It's kind of like our Christmas of emergency management, and we really get out there and celebrate big. Jocelyn does a wonderful job of setting the stage for us and making sure that we have presence both out in the community, but also within the various municipal spaces that we serve. And we've actually moved towards online self-registration public engagement sessions, and we'll actually be holding one this week on extreme heat. It's given us a really good chance to keep the dialogue going with community, and we've found that the communications teams for all three municipalities have done a great job of amplifying these engagement sessions for us. I suspect that these sessions will ebb and flow, and that they'll be sometimes somewhat situational dependent, where when we're going into extreme weather events or extreme heat times, we might have greater uptakes than other quieter times of the year. But the 2022 activities have still seen us really promoting Alertable. So Alertable is our app-based notification system. A lot of research and investment has gone into this, and Nassim truly feels like this is the best way to go in terms of what mass alerting to the public looks like. We've done a lot of work to push this app out, and we do recognize that, again, the engagement with Alertable will likely be slightly dependent on the hazards that we face in the situations that we're challenged with. So anytime that we see an event pop up, we see quite an uptake in usership around Alertable. And so we'll keep growing with that tool. We have started doing personal preparedness sessions for municipal employees. And again, these are led by Jocelyn, and just really make sure that our staff are prepared to come to work, because we know that if people aren't prepared at home, they're likely not going to be able to come into the office when an event happens. And so this is our chance to really have that conversation with our municipal colleagues. And again, I'll talk about it in further detail, but we've done really extensive work in the space of extreme heat public education and resource development. And again, we'll have our ongoing newsletter that comes out, and that's distributed primarily through the municipalities, as well as our public safety partners across the North Shore. Having a bit of a frozen moment. Operational readiness is really one of the backbones of NACIM, and it really truly is a great legacy that Mike Andrews has left the program. In 2021, we completed the Disaster Supply Cache program, and this was really an opportunity for us to make sure that we had disaster supplies spread out across the North Shore that would allow us to mobilize response processes and activities. We've actually had to use these caches a number of times. One example being when we stood up the extreme cold shelter at Christmas, and we pulled cots and blankets out of that disaster supply cache to stand up those supports. We've also moved forward with the launch of Lightship, which is our common operating picture in the EOC, which we're also actually running the online training. The online emergency management training will be hosted through Lightship. So it not only gives people a chance to train for EOC basics training, but it gives them an opportunity to do it in the platform that we expect them to be using when they come into our EOC. So it's a bit of a double duty there. We also fully launched Alertable in 2021, and again, continuing that promotion. And again, the training and exercising that takes place within the municipal staff in getting ready for Exercise 2023, which is a large regional exercise being hosted by Emergency Management BC, and ongoing ESS training and training with our neighboring municipalities. We do a lot of mutual aid support to Bowen Island and Lions Bay, and really continuing and fostering those relationships. We've also had ongoing EOC and radio system upgrades, and really thankful to have received a UBCM grant to further enhance the technology in our EOC and with our ESS programs, especially as we move on to the Evacuee Registration program, which is a new electronic-based program that helps manage and track evacuees during their time of displacement so that they don't continually have to be doing paper-based referrals. And then we produced a quick guide for responders in 2021. And this was really a point of reference that when fire was out responding to a call or assistance was needed for NACIM, they could really access a quick reference guide that was laminated and was a really quick point of access into how we need to if we needed to stand up the EOC, we could, and how to access ESS supports. In the summer, or getting ready for the summer, we hosted the first seasonal readiness session earlier this year. This was hosted on May the 4th, and it gave us a chance to set the stage on what the summer seasonal hazards looked like. This is quite normal practice in the space of emergency management, and it's one thing that I'm really happy to be bringing to the North Shore. It really gives us a chance to have these conversations with the municipal departments that we support and have them really understand the hazard landscape that could impact them going into the coming season. We're also working really closely with Metro Vancouver on the critical response route planning, and this is being done in concert with the transportation planners across all 3 municipalities, as well as standing up, and again, this is part of that governance structure, standing up the operations committee for Tri-Municipal Public Safety. This is a very operational committee that really looks at how we operationalize that shared space of operational connectivity. And we really saw that come to life in the Silverlyn apartment fire, where it was both a police event, a fire response, and a NACIM response, and it really required us to be there in deep collaboration. We've also been investing in a bit of an audit on our volunteer programming, really recognizing a lot of the strengths that it has, but a lot of the spaces where we can improve that programming and build further depth and really support our volunteers in a more meaningful way. We recognize that our work is slightly changing at Nassim. It's really requiring us to wrap around and support the community in ways that we hadn't in the past, whether it's the Wellness and Resilience Center or whether it's supporting overnight sheltering. These are skill sets that really require knowledge of de-escalation training, cultural safety and humility training, and have really required us to think of how we set our volunteers up for success in a better way. Nassim was really busy in 2021. I didn't really realize how busy we were until we put these slides together. And it made me really reflective of not just how busy we were, but how deep the team is, both in terms of staffing and in terms of the volunteer support that comes to wrap around us and the community. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I do want to talk about a few very specific ones. The incident that happened in Lynn Valley was a huge learning for me. It's an event that I had never been through in my professional career, and I wasn't sure how to support or even kind of what it looked like to move through the event. But one of the things that I did recognize from my past experience, especially with FNHA, is that events like this are incredibly traumatic, not just for the people that experience it, but for the community that's moving through it. And the only way that I could think to bring service to the community was really through a Wellness and Resilience Center. And I was so thankful that our partnership with Health Emergency Management BC was able to deploy their disaster psychosocial supports to walk alongside us through that event. And these are supports that are clinicians that volunteered their time to be with the community of Lynn Valley and to really support Nassim through this work. And it was, for me, it was really the only way that I could think about wrapping around and providing that support to the community. And I think it was very well received. I know we had well over 50 people come through while we were open, which I think was just for under a week. And when I think about other things that we've done over this past year, we definitely didn't see that level of uptake. And so it really shows for me that there is a deep need for connection and for that space of emotional wellness when we're going through those elements of crisis. This is something that Nassim has been thinking a lot about, and in partnership with North Shore Rescue, thinking about how we actually bring that training into our team, whether it's critical incident stress management, psychological first aid, and really how we hold that space for emotional wellness within our volunteers, but how we give that space as well to the community. And so Mike Dankst and I have been really thinking about how we can position this going forward in the future. I'm probably only going to draw on one more example in here, but I think it's really important to talk about North Shore being a host community to Cannon Lake. This was a result of the deep and rich fabric that we have on the North Shore. We don't have a lot of available lodging on the North Shore. It actually isn't a really easy place to be a host community, but we have an incredible depth of experience and an incredible space of leadership through Anne Martin on our team. And she was really able to bring our volunteers together to find a safe and supportive space. But I think what worked best for us is that we recognized that we could do a lot of the administrative heavy lifting and we could open up our doors for the Cannon Lake evacuees, but we really needed First Nations Health Authority to help guide us in how to support the community more wholly. And the community was actually supported through traditional foods and traditional wellness. And we really wrapped around just to provide that administrative support. And when I think about what it looks like to be a host community in the future, I actually think that it was the partnerships that got us through, and it was the partnerships that really created that strength. And it was something that has been able to last with us into the future and really build that relationship going forward. This year's been, I'm not even going to say a relatively quiet year, because I actually said that the day before the Silverlyn Apartments, unfortunately. I said it's been a very quiet year for ESS. We're now in the throes of a very significant response, and it is absolutely humbling to see the Nassim team come together. We have 4 full-time dedicated staff on this response right now out of our staff of, I would say 8, but not all of those 8 staff are full-time equivalents. And so there's incredibly heavy lifting going on, and we're working through, I think, a really difficult circumstance at this point in the response, where we're really making sure that those basic needs are being met on a daily basis, from food, clothing, and shelter. But there really does need to be a focused recovery plan and how we bring that plan to action, and to really give the evacuees a sense of stability going forward, and to really recognize that the services and supports are there, and to make sure that we have that pathway. And today we did learn a lot through a community meeting, and it will take us a bit of time to digest that information, think about what we heard, think about what the gaps are, and then how we can bring resolution to some of those gaps and help move some of these community members through the recovery process. And some will experience, unfortunately, a very long recovery in the path back to finding their home, or potentially their new home. So that's the Nassim kind of 1.5 years in review. I'm going to very quickly move through some of the strategic planning and governance pieces, because I think for me it's very exciting to see how we bring a new space of energy into Nassim, and how we really position our work to think about emergency management, but to really contextualize it within the space of resilience. One of the things that I often say is, right now, we're sometimes working downstream. We're often working at the end of an event, and we're doing a great job to support the community through that end of the event. But if we could get upstream of the event and really create deeper spaces of resilience and readiness within the community, it would help minimize those downstream impacts. And so my hope and goal for Nassim is that we really truly move into that space of resilience planning, and into a really kind of intersectional space, understanding why disasters are such highly disproportionate experiences in our community. So as a team, we really felt that this vision resonated with us. It sat well with us as a team. We are a resilient North Shore through strengthening and building connections across municipalities, partners, and neighbors. We felt like it really spoke to the work that we did and the future that we want to be in. We also recognized as a team that we wanted to bring values to life in our office, but also help those values breathe energy into our work. We want to be a values-based organization that does our work with purpose and meaning. And we felt that these values of wellness, integrity, professionalism, collaboration, and a highly inclusive workplace were what we wanted to foster and honor through all of our pieces of work. Additionally, through that strategic planning, we were actually able to look at how we wanted to focus core areas of work at Nassim. We really want to dig deep into governance. Being a tri-municipal entity is really wonderful. It brings so much capacity to our work, but governance is so critical to the success of Nassim. We need to make sure that we're serving every municipality in the unique way that they operate, but doing it in a way that finds similarities between all three, and honors a place where everybody can come together under that space of response and see themselves in that space, but also know that the attention and focus is also on their municipal space, and that attention and detail is being attended to. Municipal readiness is a really, really critical part of the work at Nassim. We really need to think about how we're how we're creating that legacy of readiness within the municipalities. And it comes down to much more than just training. It comes down to making sure that Nassim is really mindful and focused on what the priorities of each municipality are, and that our planning is really reflective of what those priorities look like. Case in point, the active threat planning has been a really critical way, not just to meet the needs of the District of North Van, but it's been a way for us to really deeply connect across all of the business areas and really understand what that point of connection for the Nassim team looks like. And again, strategic and operational planning, it dovetails really nicely into that space of operational readiness, but making sure that our plans are not just plans, that they're mindful and thoughtful. We could have just updated the extreme heat response plan, but that would have just been updating the plan. What we needed to do was make sure that there was a clear communication strategy, that we were really paying attention to the responses that we had just gone through. And to do that, we actually needed to create a strategic framework. And when I think about all the big and robust plans at Nassim, as we move through these updates, whether it's the seismic plan, whether it's a business continuity plan, we have to actually be mindful that it's not just a plan on paper, that there's a strategic framework really supporting the eternity and the wholeness of that plan, so that it has points of connection to all the work that we do. And then partnerships and engagement. This piece can't be undersung. We had the privilege this year of bringing Ryan Benson onto our team as a TA. He's joined us from the federal government for a secondment into the Manager of Community Partnerships and Recovery. And this position is instrumental to Nassim. We know that we cannot do our work effectively without our community partners. Even though we might think that we are the point of connection to the community, we know that our community partners are running that last mile. They're really kind of that point of connection into our most vulnerable community members, and they know how to create that connection. And so we really need to bring them into that space of both disaster response, but more importantly, into that space of disaster recovery. So within the North Shore Recovery Framework, a big piece of that will be partnership engagement and how our partners actually help us run this last mile alongside community. And then operations and readiness is just an ongoing, really critical piece of work. My hope is that as the new manager of operational readiness comes on board, that they're really able to bring life into this operational space and actually have us realize how wonderful our operational depth is, but actually write the detailed operational plans that need to be written at Nassim. We have so much operational depth, and my hope is that it can be written up into planning processes so that it's actually much more seamless to interface with for all of the response partners that we hold in this work. The last piece that I'm really going to touch on tonight is the North Shore Extreme Weather Strategy. And this has been a huge undertaking at Nassim. This really speaks to the credit of Ryan Benson and John Hawkes in the incredible heavy lifting that they've done over the better part of 2022. As many of you are aware, we went through 3 significant heat events, the first being the heat dome, and then 1 extreme cold event over Christmas. This really required the entire Nassim team to mobilize the response structure and actually stand up the response plan. We realized right away that there were significant gaps in the 2019 extreme heat response plan. We worked through the event and kind of pivoted around the plan for 2019, and we were able to work really effectively. But going through those experiences really let us know that we had a lot to learn about extreme heat, as did many other municipalities, and it gave us a lot of food for thought. So we started the North Shore Extreme Heat Strategy. We recognized that it wasn't going to be a plan that was going to actually improve the response. It was going to be a whole host of visionary documents, which included the North Shore Extreme Weather After Action Review. This was a consolidation of all of the responses that took place, including the extreme cold response. It included all of the partner agencies that were involved in the response, as well as the community-based organizations, both that provide support to the homeless community, as well as that provide support to the seniors community. Through that after action review, we came up with 24 recommendations, and these were high-level recommendations that really set the stage for change. Nassim was able to then take those 24 recommendations and create a more actionable work plan that looked at short, medium, and long-term priority setting. And really, I think will help us take those next step stages to bring recommendations to life. Some will be quite easy to do, others will require investments and recommendations for change that will work collaboratively with the municipalities on and different departments. And we'll look at how we can utilize grant funding and other financial mechanisms to move processes forward. The extreme heat operational response plan has taken on a new life, and this isn't just on the North Shore. Almost every municipality across Metro Vancouver has likely updated their plan this year, and we received incredible guidance from Emergency Management BC, from Environment and Climate Change Canada, from BC CDC, and from our other health partners. We were able to define really clear thresholds on what it looked like to respond and what meaningful response looked like. And we now have an incredibly robust process on the North Shore that actually allows us to escalate our response structure quite seamlessly. Perhaps our biggest learning was that if you build it, they may not come. So we stood up a cooling center over the heat dome and we saw very little uptake. We thought it was perhaps due to communication, but when we started to actually meet with the community-based organizations and around the people that were most impacted, we realized that people will very likely not come to a new environment, to unfamiliar surroundings. And we realized that the best course of action was going to be to stand up pre-existing municipal facilities, use the depth of capacity that we have on a day-to-day basis. And so we've met deeply and connected deeply with our libraries and with our rec and community spaces, both in West Van and the North Vancouver Rec Commission, to really look at how we build up our pre-existing municipal infrastructure with our municipal staffing capacity to support extreme heat events. People want to go where they feel safe. And we know that they feel safe going to libraries. We know that they feel safe going to rec centers. And so we've looked at augmenting that capacity. And through a very escalated space of response, we'll be working with the libraries, with the Rec Commission to make sure that our rec centers are ready to welcome people during extreme heat events. And based off of all the feedback that we've heard, all the after action reviews, we feel very confident this is the right direction to go in. As we escalate through the response strategy, and you'll see all of this is detailed on page 4, where we look at these rates of escalation. It could be that we wind up in another extreme heat situation. And in that case, we'll make sure that we're able to utilize our ESS, our emergency support services supports if need be, and we're able to mobilize and stand up overnight sheltering, which is actually what we did for the extreme cold event over the winter. We recognize for the extreme cold event, we need to do that in a very nuanced way with the shelter providers and not create redundancies, but really just create support structures around the already existing structures in place. And then perhaps one of the biggest changes was creating an extreme heat communication strategy. And again, big thanks to the communications teams for helping provide us a format that worked and to really help us guide us in this journey. But what we were able to do was really synthesize how we needed to make these changes, what we heard from the community, and then how we could move a new communication strategy forward. This is obviously both web-based, so changing up our web platform, making sure that we have significant social media presence, but it's also making sure that we connect with the vulnerable populations that really struggle to access public education in the first place. We also really recognized that the message needed to change. Historically, municipalities had really taken a public education perspective of just how to keep cool and what cooling looked like. We now know that we need to provide much more robust messaging, and we're doing that in partnership with health, where we're actually messaging the difference between heat stroke and heat exhaustion so that people really know when they need to go and get help and what that help looks like. And out of that, out of the public education resources, a trifold brochure is just being completed right now through graphics, and it will be ready for print over the next few weeks. And then out of those graphics, we'll also do smaller tent cards and a poster to help put into highly visible and public spaces. So a lot of work there, and a lot of really mindful and methodical work to make sure that what we have put forward has been ground truth, both from the experiences of what the North Shore went through, but from the subject matter experts that are really helping guide this heat-based work provincially. And so this is just thank you from the Nassim team. And I'm really honored to say that, and I just had a little note for myself here, but we actually received a volunteer service award last week for the commitment of the Nassim volunteers in their ability to deploy and in their ability to support broadly through the North Shore, but also in terms of disaster response and services out into the Fraser Valley for the atmospheric river event, but also through the province to respond to the different fire events last year. So just a big extension of gratitude. So thank you for your time tonight. And I'm happy to answer any questions or engage in dialogue. And there are a few members of the Nassim team online as well. And so I'm always happy for them to jump in too if there's any questions that they might be able to answer as well.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentation tonight and for all of your work picking up the reins in the middle of a busy time here on the North Shore. At this point, I did just want to refer to our Council Liaison on North Shore Emergency Management Office. Councillor Murray, if you have any comments, that would be appreciated.
Hi, thank you, Mayor Little. Well, thank you, Emily. That was a very, that was an excellent presentation, and you really brought us up to speed as to what's been going on with Nassim in the last little while, certainly through all the events that we've been kept apprised of and that we've been involved in, but certainly, you know, how you have, you know, come into this operation. You know, you've been with us for a couple of years, I think now. How long?
A year and a half.
A year and a half, so almost a couple of years, but I think COVID was a bit of a blur, and you had a lot on your plate as you took over the reins for Nassim. And I do also just want to thank, you know, Mike Andrews, recently retired, and thank him for all of his work over the years. We were very lucky to have him come. He had extensive experience, certainly through the provincial emergency program, and he brought a lot of great projects and understanding to our community. He lives in our community, so we're grateful. I'm sure we'll call on him in the future, and I better be signing up for the volunteer list now that he's retired. But I want to thank Mike. We are going through, as Emily talked about, a new governance model, and she touched on sort of the communications part of that and wanting to get out more to the community in regards to communicating the emergency plans. You know, it was something that the council liaison reps were always very interested in. And I think as we move forward through this new governance model, it really is an operational governance model that we're looking at, because that's what emergency response is. It's all operations. And I think I could speak for all of the members, the liaisons from the councils, when I say that we are looking forward to having Emily come on a more regular basis to present to our councils, because this is information we really need to share to whole councils and to the community on a regular basis to encourage them to become more readily prepared for those emergencies that, you know, we talk a lot about preparing ourselves, but it doesn't always, it's not always top of mind. And often it's a little bit too late when you're thinking about it. Well, there's an event occurring. I mean, who would have guessed that last year, you know, it would have flooded into the other side of the road in Ambleside. And yet another event in regards to a fire in Lynn Valley. I mean, we've had 3 in the last little while in the district of North Vancouver, you know, 3 too many. So I think the communications is absolutely integral, and our communications team, certainly partnering with all of the municipal communications team, Carolyn Grafton and her team with the district, and then our colleagues in the other municipalities, and our First Nations partners too, working with them to make sure that, you know, we all come together, we are all resilient together as one community. Absolutely critical. Just a couple of things, Mayor Little, if you'll just indulge me for a moment. You know, certainly the cooling, the issue of cooling, and the issue of warming when we're in, you know, minus whatever, those extreme events that we've experienced. Certainly the provincial government has just had their media release in regards to their next steps in regards to a potential heat system that comes into the community, although you wouldn't know it right now with the weather that we've been experiencing, but we need to be vigilant at being prepared for that. I know they're looking at grants for air conditioning units. Many of our buildings, and even some of our newer buildings for seniors, do not have the capabilities right now to put in air conditioning. So it's individual units, and I think there's a grant program that we're looking at. I think it would be really interesting for maybe Mr. Stewart to connect with his colleagues through the provincial government to let us understand, you know, the response from first responders in regards to paramedics, for instance. I know, you know, we were concerned about the level of staffing in regards to the paramedics, and was there enough ability for, you know, first responders to get to those people that were, you know, dealing with heat exhaustion and the impacts of the heat dome last year. I know that the provincial government has said that they were looking at a hiring. I'm not sure, you know, how successful they have been with that, but certainly I think it's really important for us to understand our complement and what our first responders, such as fire department and police, can do to aid in those situations. And I guess lastly, just on the heels of, you know, what's happened at Silverland Apartments, I think in the last couple of events, Lions Manor in Deep Cove and Silverland in Lynn Valley, I think it's a first where we've had fewer places to be able to house those that have been evacuated. I know we've got some residents from Silverland that are out at UBC right now. And I think council really needs to understand the logistics of those kinds of, you know, the logistics of those kinds of moments where we can't house them locally. You know, we need to be able to move some of their things out of the buildings in the future so they can start rebuilding the building or you know, begin to repair it. And it's a long way to go from UBC when you're doing that. So those kinds of issues we really need to think about. You know, Lower Capilano Road was once, you know, filled with hotels, and we're losing a lot of those hotels and motels, and that's where we would typically house residents that were displaced during an event. And I think that we need to talk about how we are going to address that going forward, because we're not the only municipality that is dealing with this kind of situation, and it is an emergent situation, certainly with climate change, certainly with the events that we've seen, and we know that they're going to get worse. I'm really glad I was part of the team that made the decision to bring Ms. Emily Dickin on board, and I think you've been you know, you're just the way that you've approached so many things. I've heard great things, and I know the community feels secure with your leadership. And I know that I'm hearing, you know, lots of good things in regards to the response that you've had to deal with in the last little while. And thank you so much. We look forward to more presentations from you and keeping us up to date. And you know, how we can be part of those events where we go out and train, we work with our community, and we get our community involved in going through some of these exercises as well, because I think that would certainly give us a leg up in regards to making people feel more secure and more prepared for themselves and their families. So thanks again. Thank you, Mayor Little.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you for your work on the North Shore Emergency Management Office Board. The next speaker I have is Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you, Ms. Dickin, for both your very comprehensive written materials and also your very comprehensive presentation tonight. And thank you, Councillor Murray, for your comments as well. I want to focus a little on the heat dome and the consequences of that to our community. It was, of course, one of the most catastrophic public health events in history. Hundreds of people, approaching 700 people across the province died. And the tragedy of course, that all those deaths were preventable because we had abundant resources in terms of the absolute amount of interior space where people could have been cooled and kept alive. It was a public health failure, and without pointing any fingers, because there's an explanation, a series of explanations as to why that happened. But nonetheless, it was a catastrophe that could have been avoided. You earlier today, Ms. Dickin, directed me to the coroner's report on extreme heat that had some data in it. Doesn't directly address the number of district residents who died in the heat dome, but extrapolating from the numbers that are there would suggest that between 10 and 15 North Vancouver district residents, and likely between 15 and 25 North Shore residents died of extreme heat during the heat dome. So question that I would ask for the benefit of the public, from your point of view, are we now in a position where, should such an event occur again, those 10 to 15 souls would be spared? And if so, what is the strategy? Put simply, what would be the strategy to keep those people alive? Thank you very much.
For sure. It's definitely hard to know how, sorry, Mary Little, is it okay to respond right now?
Yes,
yeah.
Please.
It's definitely hard to know how a future event will play out. There's always a lot of different, we never have the same disaster event twice. Even if we see the same heat again, it will essentially play out in different ways. I think that COVID and the fatigue of the healthcare system played a heavy role in that. I think given the fact that it happened in June, right at the end of the school year, played a significant role. We know that because the schools closed, there were a number of first responder elements of the first responder community, whether they were nurses at Lionsgate, paramedics, were not able to attend work over those few days because they were home caring for their children because the schools closed. There were so many competing factors that actually went into this one heat dome event that it's incredible when you actually begin to really dismantle the event. So whether it would play out the same again, I'm not sure. What I can speak to is I feel very confident that the investments that have been made into the North Shore over the past 12 months have been incredibly robust. I would actually say that they're incredibly transformative changes because it hasn't just changed how we'll respond, it's changing how we're providing the information to the community to respond. And one of the grants that we hope to get this year through UBCM, which we'll soon be presenting to Council at the end of the month, will really look to how we bring mitigation into our most vulnerable homes on the North Shore. We know that the most vulnerable members of our community live in 3-story wood structure apartment buildings. They're seniors living on their own, and they often have pre-existing medical conditions. We were able to track this through the responses that were taken by the District of North Van, City of North Van, and District of West Van fire departments. And by tracking their responses, we're actually really able to see where the greatest spaces of vulnerability are. So the grant application that we're going to put forth is not just for vulnerability mapping. It's to recognize that we have these vulnerabilities and understand how we can use the grant to create mitigation measures. We'd like, because we know what the extreme heat threshold is for catastrophic loss from a heat event, we know that we can't have people in buildings when temperatures reach a certain degree. So by giving vulnerable individuals, even as something as simple as a thermometer that they can put on their fridge and monitor their own heat, can let them know actually when they need to get out of their building and when it's simply not safe. We're also going to look at creating investments that can be made to our community-based organizations that can give them the mechanisms to better support the community members that they serve, whether it's looking at a fan and air conditioning loan program and how those fans can get out into the community and out to the most vulnerable community members. Or just how we can create that interface so that we're actually creating greater accountability for building managers who are really interfacing on a day-to-day with the members that live in their building and how they can help us monitor that. So I would say that I feel very confident that we'll be going into these extreme heat events in a much more prepared and ready way. But again, I don't know what will unfold from the actual events, but my hope is that it would result in a much higher space of public safety.
Very much.
Thank you.
And the next speaker we have is Councillor Curran.
Thank you. So just my microphone on and not the Zoom, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you so much for that presentation, and thanks to all of the work that everyone, including all of the staff and all of the community partners, put into that. Was very informative. So thank you for sort of highlighting everything. A few specific questions. Like, I work a lot in the space of resilience as well, and as a more in the climate space, but it's all connected to building healthy, resilient communities. And I just wondered, you spoke to creating a resilience, I think you used the term framework. And I'm wondering what the roles of Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish and all three governments here can do to advance that work. Because I think a resilience strategy, which is, you're using the word framework, so I guess we can clarify what same, okay. But like what that would look like, because to me, the point that just keeps being brought home, and this was from the heat dome and from everything, is the connection, the social connection, the social fabric of a community is what keeps communities resilient. So it is, we're oftentimes better prepared at the end of the line and less prepared throughout the life cycle leading up to it. And I think that's been certainly highlighted by what's happening at Silverland now, which is basically the same exact situation we were in with Lions Manor. I want to again thank everyone for their work on that, but we have language barriers, we have people with disabilities, we have people with medical underlying conditions, we have issues, underlying conditions that create less resilience. And so I wondered if you could speak to what our role is and how we can facilitate a strong partnership with all 5 orders of governance across the North Shore.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is really key, and it dovetails so nicely into the work of emergency management. We know that disasters are not jurisdictional events for the most part. We know that that's what creates the strength of NACIM, is that we have the ability to really support the whole connected space and fabric of the North Shore. And when I think about resilience, it really comes along in that same vein. Resilience, although it can be built within, you know, the municipal space, and it can align to the municipal strategic priorities, to make it truly strong, it really is a North Shore wide picture. Our greatest strength as a municipality is that we have neighbors that walk alongside us, and whether it's the 3 municipalities and or the 2 nations walking together, that space of wisdom and resilience, it actually it's strengthened when we're all working together. And each of the municipalities, and I think Nassim's in such a privileged space where we get to see the unique strengths and qualities that each municipality holds. They're all so incredibly unique and so incredibly gifted in different areas. And when I think about what it looks like to create that picture on the North Shore, I think that together there's a space of collaboration to do it and to enrich each other in the way that we all see our work and kind of own our different areas of expertise. And I think of the incredible climate leadership that's coming out of the District of North Van. I look at some of the incredible social leadership that's coming out of the city of North Vancouver. I look at other areas of operational excellence in terms of like the police excellence coming out of West Vancouver and the great work that they're doing around their active threat training. And I just see when I look at it collectively, I just see a beautiful picture of capacity. And when we all work together at it, we kind of build that space of wisdom. And honestly, when I look at the nations, they actually had a death rate of 0 on both reserves during the heat dome. And we've started to really look at this at Nassim and understand why that's the case. And you're right, Councillor Curran, it really came down to the social fabric of the community, the connection of the community, and the ability to wrap around their elders. Obviously, there's different infrastructure dynamics in both communities than we have in the 3 municipalities. But it's really important to recognize that they took a different social process for how to protect their elders from the heat. And it was really through that wraparound support at the community level. And so we have a lot to learn from our neighboring nations in terms of how to support our elders during extreme heat events. And it's one thing that we do hope to do with this grant as well, is how to create cross-cultural learning and how to actually honor the exceptional work that was done for both the Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh due to the extreme heat events.
Thank you so much for that. I just on a sort of federal level, because this is a space that's moving quickly, because I think it did the 20 events of 2021 in British Columbia are definitely changing the conversation at all orders of government. So a lot of times the work around adaptation is sort of focused on built infrastructure and not as much social infrastructure. Even when I look through our 2017 adaptation strategy, when it speaks of resilience, it's usually about resilient, healthy forests, and it's more about the rest of nature, not the human nature. And so I think that's going to be interesting to see how we weave our climate adaptation strategies into this resilience work. I think that's going to be really, and all of the work that we're doing. And just contextually, the federal government is working on their adaptation strategy that's coming out at the end of 2022. So that's going to be the first time we even hear from the federal government on adaptation, which should have resilience work in it. And then, of course, at the provincial level. And just thinking of buildings, because buildings where we spend 9 out of our 10 breaths, or where 9 out of our 10 breaths happen, the building code at a federal level, we've been doing advocacy around that, because there's no maximum temperature for buildings. There's only minimum temperature for buildings. And now we're realizing that we need filtration and cooling. And so I guess we'll follow up with staff, because that's on our side, about following some of the work that Vancouver has done around new buildings always having air filtration and always having cooling in them. And as you said, making sure that people who are in these older buildings are supported this summer. When we looked through the BC CDC, when we heard the recap of the heat dome, it really came down to someone knocking on your door. That it was the human connection that could have changed people's lives. So to Councillor Hanson's question, that's the work, right? Yes, we can do a lot on built infrastructure, but if you don't have a human connection to someone else, you are less likely to be safe. And then I think this event at Silverland has just highlighted to me the urgency, and other members of council have brought this up as well, about our ability to respond, and not just to address the underlying conditions, which of course we have to do, but when we have these events. Right now, we have seniors at UBC. Your response is typically 72 hours. There's a gap between your response. It would be treated differently if it was a wildfire than if it's a structural fire. And so we're just finding gaps, I think, along the way. And so it'll be important to close those, but we couldn't be in better hands. I'm super grateful for all the work that you and your team are doing, as well as the partnerships like at our staff and all the other municipalities. And then with, as you mentioned, really learning from Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish Nation on this. So thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Kern, for your comments. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am so impressed with this report and with your presentation tonight. You and your colleagues have done an exceptional amount of work. And we all thought COVID, everybody was not working as hard. I think you were pulling double time at least. I just had a couple of comments that I wanted to make, and I'm glad to see in your report that there's a framework of making sort of the management of the building, the managers of the building more responsible for their tenants, because that seems to be part of the problem, especially when you get into these older purpose-built type rentals, these 3-story wood buildings that you were talking about, is that they're older, and it's usually not always, but usually it's an older community that's living in there as well. And they don't have the same kind of infrastructure in the building that other buildings do have. I also am pleased to hear about you with the alertable app and the, was it called the Lighthouse app, that you're using technology to facilitate better communication and maybe smoother transition when an emergency does come up. I also had phoned in last week to our staff because I thought they would be responsible for this, and they said no, it would be your organization, and they said you might want to tune in on Monday night, but I would be tuning in anyway. I had read and heard about a provincial grant that is called Extreme Heat Risk Mapping, Assessment and Planning, and it has a deadline of June 24th. Have we applied to that?
So we're working hard right now to consolidate a tri-municipal application, as well as seeing if the 2 nations would like to partner with us as well. That was the grant that I spoke about, where we want to look at not just vulnerability mapping and understand what we actually learned from our response data. We want to take it one step further, and we really look at how we mitigate that vulnerability. So we're hoping to use the grant for non-structural small project mitigation strategies.
Okay, I thought that might be the case when I was listening to the presentation, but that's 11 days away, so I hope
we're working hard. So I'll be back to you guys later with a resolution for that grant. We can submit the grant application and work with UBCM to make sure we're on the right path, and then come forward for the resolution. And because we'll be tri-municipal and possibly including the nations, it will include resolutions from all 3 nations as well as band council resolutions. So we have a bit of administrative work to do once we submit the grant.
Perfect. I kind of figured you'd be on top of this just because you're on top of everything else. So I'm glad to hear that we are submitting an application for that. Just one other thing, I have a real concern, and I think when you look at the statistics on the report that came out, the coroner's report that came out, I can't remember the exact percentages. I knew them like when the report first came out, but I can't remember them now. But most of the deaths were elderly. And a large percentage of that elderly were people that were living on their own. And so I know that you talk about the organizations reaching out to people and through their networks. But what I'm wondering is, some elderly aren't necessarily necessarily living in multi-residential buildings.
Mhm.
We have elderly and sometimes living on their own, or it's two elderly people living in a home. And maybe they don't need any services at the moment, but something like that heat dome might have really affected them. And they may not have any immediate family living close, because some of us, like myself, has lost their family to having to move somewhere else where they can afford to live. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts might be on making a registry that seniors could actually phone into, seniors who may not have family living around them, could actually phone into and make a registry of a list. And I'm not sure who would handle that, but where they phone in and give us the information as well, if they're not in any of these programs. And then if there is an emergency, we have a body that will make phone calls to those numbers. Are we thinking about anything like that?
Totally. I'm smiling because I feel like John Hawkes on my team right now is probably doing a little dance behind the scenes. This is really something that he's wanted to bring to life at Nassim, is basically a call structure where folks who are really needing that outreach and support can call in and create that point of connection. Our hope is that it's alive and running as soon as we can get it there, possibly this summer. If not, it may have to wait for a little bit, but my hope is that with the right infrastructure and support, we can get it alive and online. But really it's creating that call center and that one point of connection where people can reach out for support that isn't calling 911. It's not calling for those first responder supports, but maybe just calling to get additional information, or just to let people know that they are living in isolation and may need to be checked up on. I think it also speaks to Councillor Curran's point, though, that we really need to create neighborhood accountability and neighborly accountability. As neighbors, we need to know that we can reach out across our community and actually support the people that we're living next to. And it might not be that, you need to be great friends with them or a great point of contact, but when we're under these extreme heat spaces, just a quick pop in, or even just creating those visual cues and connections, go a long way. And so I do think that there's a lot of messaging, a lot of public education that we can do to strengthen that and actually help to continually reinforce that. But it's a really good point, Councillor Forbes.
Great. I'm really pleased. And again, you're on top of it and your team's on top of it. So thank you. Thank you very much for what you've done so far. And I really look forward to what you do going forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Beck, your comments.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Ms. Dickin. What a wonderful presentation. Very comprehensive, and I certainly learned a lot. So really mine is just a comment, and I want to express my gratitude for the work that you do. Sorry, I'm not quite sure where to look there. I'll look up there. You're on the screen. But I just think it's such a great example of collaboration across the North Shore when we look at what Nassim does and all of the different groups and organizations that you work with. And just to pick up on this theme that some of my colleagues have been talking about, and Councillor Forbes' point around reaching vulnerable seniors, I think it really is about strengthening those social connections. And so anything that we can do to promote that. I recall hearing Isabel McKenzie, BC Senior Advocate, speaking most recently at the LMLGA, and she really highlighted that whether it's COVID or a heat dome, it's the communities and that have those strong social connections that tend to have the best outcomes. But thank you so much for your work. And as Councillor Murray pointed out, hopefully we can have some more regular updates from Nassim, because I know it's a lot to digest, but hopefully we can be part of more regular conversations with some of these different issues. And I know I'd like to take part in some of the training exercises and different opportunities where we can be a part of some of those events. I know I'd love to do that myself. So thank you very much, Ms. Dickin. I'm really impressed just with everything that Nassim does. It makes me really proud to see all of the different groups across the North Shore working together like this. And I really appreciate your leadership through the last couple of years. Thank you.
very much, Councillor Back. Councillor Murray?
I just wanted to add something quickly, Mayor Little, just on this neighborhood and community connection. Ms. Dickens, a few years ago, the neighborhoods, well, over 4 years ago almost, the neighborhoods, especially in Seymour, just because of the access to the Seymour, to the Second Narrows Bridge, had a huge infiltration of break-ins in the neighborhood. And in the Block Watch history, there had never been more interest in becoming Block Watch aware than, you know, I mean, I think, you know, when you go back maybe 40 years when or 50 years when Block Watch came into our communities through the RCMP, I think, you know, there was nothing compared to, you know, the interest that the community had over 4 years ago. And there were waiting lists to take the training. I was a Block Watch captain, a co-captain, and there was an actual waiting list to get into the program. There were so many people becoming involved. And over the years, we have brought this up, that Block Watch connection and those local community connections, such as our community associations and the numerous number of community pages that are available on Facebook. Those are the community connections. They exist already. And I would really encourage the team to begin to look at what already exists within our communities, because I think you will find that they are already set up and they are already keeping an eye on many of the vulnerable residents within their neighborhoods. You know, certainly I know the mayor keeps, you know, in his neighborhood keeps an eye on their neighbors, and I've certainly done the same, and other councillors, Councillor Hanson up in Blue Ridge and Councillor and Back and Forbes up in Lynn Valley and Councillor Kern in the Cove, and then Councillor Bond in Inter River. I mean, we all have experience in that, but it's not that we've brought that to the neighborhoods. It's that they've already, you know, done that on their own. And so we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We have those connections. It's just a matter of putting you in contact and your team in contact with those people that run those groups. And I really think a good heart-to-heart with the RCMP and the Block Watch program, because I know they don't like mixing their communications, but I really think it's a lost opportunity, and we really need to start looking at it a lot more seriously, because I think the impact would be enormous in a very positive way. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murray. You know, it's interesting, as times change, our responses need to be updated. It used to be that the welfare check used to look like the milkman would leave the milk on the front step, and if the mail carrier came by the next day and it wasn't cleared up, there was going to be a welfare check, right? We really had those to-the-door services in our community that were able to do a second double check and make sure that people were okay. And as you know, mail has been consolidated into these super boxes as routine deliveries to the community really changed in nature. We still get lots of deliveries, but they're not as predictable and reliable as the milk used to be. That we have to find other ways to be able to respond and to be able to track welfare in the community. And sometimes we will be able to use, as Councillor Murray mentioned, the modern tools that we have through apps and websites. But we also have to remember that it's going to be a boots on the ground exercise and a real emergency to make sure that we get the message out, because not everybody is on every app. And so even though the apps help, they're never going to give us the full coverage that we expect in those kinds of emergencies. But really appreciate the update today. Sorry, Councillor Kern, I see your hand. Did you have a further comment on that?
Just briefly, I was at a presentation with the Canadian Union of Postal Workers recently.
Yes. And
they're actually talking about their infrastructure as being a way, especially in rural communities, but as a point of contact, and how they can reimagine. There's way more post offices than Tim Hortons in Canada. Little known fact, at least I didn't know that. So looking at the infrastructure that exists, to your point, and how we can repurpose that for this time, I think is really something. And it was a really impressive presentation about all the ideas they had in terms of their built form being a place for cooling and relief, and just looking at that infrastructure differently. And I just wanted to ask, I really appreciate the trauma-informed approach that you, how you enter into the work. And I just wondered if volunteers go through that training as well, because I think that that's something we, as electeds, everyone should understand what that means. And I wondered where that goes in within the organization.
This is something that came up recently in our conversations with the libraries around how we best support them to be that initial receiving space during extreme heat and cold events. And they were really open with us and said that their staff need critical and focused training on de-escalation, trauma-informed practice, and cultural safety and humility around crisis-based events. And so I was actually invited to talk to the Library Directors of Canada this week, and we actually went through what trauma-informed practice looks like, and we went through what psychological first aid looks like, and went through the tips. And it made me really realize that we have the wisdom and skills to deliver this training on the North Shore. And so we've made that commitment to the library directors that Naseem will make this training available to all of their staff throughout the summer. We just need to kind of consolidate dates. And as well, in the Naseem team, we're really looking, that gap analysis was really about how we create a much more, not just informed Naseem volunteer base, but how we actually support our volunteers when they've experienced engagements out in their responses that have left them in a space of experiencing lateral violence, or a time when maybe that space of de-escalation didn't quite work out the way that they thought it would. And so we recognize that our landscape of work is incredibly changing, and we need to change with it. And one of the things that I've asked the Justice Institute of BC, who is the space that really provides a lot of our operational training, is if they can actually enter into this space and actually hold this training for municipalities. From a Naseem perspective, we are fortunate that this is kind of one of the background spaces that I come to Naseem with. That said, there's so much that I don't know about this work as well that I would love to lean on other experts who can come and support Naseem through this process. So it's something that we're looking very deeply at, but it's also something where the field of practice is going through an incredible change right now, and we might be a bit of the head of the curve with that.
Great. Thank you so much. I was reminded from Councillor Curran's comment that, QPBC also sponsors the City Watch program, where they encourage their own staff members to be looking for things that look out of place in the community. And we have to be vigilant about training our staff beyond the North Shore Emergency Management Office to be looking for things that look out of place. I know we've certainly done that with our staff in regard to people who could possibly have memory care or dementia issues and might be walking through one of our parks and look a little lost, and making sure that our staff are responding. But with a certain level of vigilance, you can actually have a tremendous amount of coverage and protection in the community, just with the eyes of the municipal staff in and around the community as well, because they sort of know what to look for once you train them and they see something that's out of place. So, but once again, Councillor Forbes, you had a question?
Yes, I just wanted to ask, we've talked about trainings tonight on different things, and we're talking about training right now. But I don't think council's been ever invited to some of these trainings. And I wonder if council could be invited, because I'd certainly be interested in going to some of these trainings myself. I mean, sometimes counselors get a phone call from somebody that's really out of sorts, and, learning how to sort of talk to somebody and sort of de-escalate and guide them to where they can go for help, instead of just saying, well, I'll give you a phone number, would be much better. I'd prefer to do that to actually help and not just pass it on. So I'd be interested if those, any training sessions that come up that would be appropriate for council to attend, for that invitation to come to all of us and all councils, the city and West Van, and include us into. I look forward to that. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes, and I highly recommend those training opportunities for all members of council. I've done the emergency social services training in the past for setup of reception centers, and it's important. The confidence it gives you in an emergency to say, all right, this is what needs to happen, and so, or to be able to recognize that what needs to happen is happening, by going and getting the experience with those training scenarios. So. Highly recommend going and either being an observer or even better, being an active participant as a volunteer with emergency social services. I think it gives you an invaluable experience. Yeah. Okay, well, we have another meeting coming up at 7 o'clock, and I hope there's an opportunity for, if any members of the public would like to speak, I think we've wrapped up council's opportunity to speak at this point. And I see Mr. Teven, if you have quick comments, then that would be great. We do have to go on to a 7 o'clock meeting after this point, which I'm sure you're well aware of, but Mr. Teven, your comments.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Indeed, I am well aware. I'm registered to speak at that as well. I want to say thank you to North Shore Emergency Management for everything that you do. One of the things I want to feed back to you as a private citizen is what we really appreciate about you is that you're much closer to us, the citizens. And sadly, I would say that our perception of the provincial and federal governments is that they just completely dropped the ball. And I'll continue to look for rebuilding of Lytton as some sign that that's getting better. So the closer that you get to the citizens, the better. We have a lot of faith in you. As I say, I'm not so much sure about the province and feds. One of the things that I am concerned with is, and you don't need to comment because I know our time is short, but just to consider this, is what plans are there to help when a power outage is combined with an extreme weather event? Because I know I've seen here at the base of Seymour where we've been without power for multiple days. One of the things that we had occur, and another recommendation I have for you, is that during large wind events and large power outage events, that I really feel that North Shore Emergency Management should be part of the decision-making team along with BC Hydro. And the reason I say that is because during that last big wind event that we had, I've got the dates somewhere, and I could give them to you on request. The Seymour area, Indian River, where I live, was one of the earliest to lose power. And we were either the last or second last to get power restored. Now, I'm not complaining about my own lot. What I'm complaining about is that the BC Hydro crews saw fit to leave Mount Seymour Road completely blocked with live wires down in the road. And our fire department from the Seymour station had to attend there throughout the entire night. BC Hydro came out at about 8 o'clock in the morning. The firefighters all changed shifts. BC Hydro came, deactivated the live wires, left the road blocked. And what that meant was there was no first responder access to Anne MacDonald Way, the golf course, and the entire Mount Seymour Provincial Park. I don't believe that BC Hydro should have the authority to make those decisions. It should be someone with local knowledge. And I really would say that I wish that there was legislation that gave you authority over them, because to me, to have no 911 service to all of Seymour Park ought to be against the law. Thank you. Oh, sorry, one last little point. That is, next time you do an exercise, I encourage you to do it without internet. Because if we have a large event, what are the chances that all the routers and communication towers are staying live? Try it without internet, see how it goes. Thank you.
And when they do the exercises, they do consider those things depending on the nature of the event. So, you know, if it's a caustic soda spill, a train car turning over, then they tend to expect that there will still be those traditional communication ways. When they're talking about wildfire and earthquake, they tend to read into the rules of the exercise those kinds of limits, because you're absolutely right. There's quite a number of incidents that can occur in a community that you can't rely on. You got to go back to ham radio. You got to go back to which is why we support a radio club, because that's where you're going to be in those events. And unfortunately, that is getting to be a rare skill. People who can operate those ham radios that in the 1950s and 60s, you know, all the kids were learning how to do it, and nowadays it's really our immigrant community that's come to the community, come from education services in other parts of the world that still have the ham radio as part of their education. Now they're coming back here and sharing that knowledge back with us, because it hasn't been part of our education system for a while now. But anyway, I just wanted to say on behalf of the council, thank you so much for your presentation today. Lots of detail, lots for us to consider. And I look forward to having more frequent communications with the North Shore Emergency Management Office and your team going forward. So on behalf of council, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, council, I'm going to prepare to wrap up. I will accept adjournment if somebody offers it. From Councillor Back, accepted. We'll be resuming with the regular meeting of council at 7 o'clock, which I believe is on a different link. So you're going to have to. Nope. It's stay on. You're welcome to stay on this link. This is the link for the regular meeting of council tonight. So, but you're welcome to shut off your camera until the start of the meeting. Have a great break.
Your worship?
Yes.